Joining us live to discuss the latest films is Assistant Professor of Broadcasting, Digital Media, and Journalism at Cedarville University, Professor Sean O'Connor. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
Good morning. How are you guys today?
Good. I was showing my wife some of your social media reviews yesterday of some of the films that came out because it's been all the rage in my house. I got home from work the other day, and my son last week, he goes, "Dad, Barbenheimer." And I was like, "What?" I didn't have any idea what he meant. So for the uninitiated, explain Barbenheimer.
Right. So that's a term that's been going around the internet all weekend, all summer really. But this past weekend, two huge movies came out in theaters. One was the Barbie movie. The other was Oppenheimer, which is a drama about J. Robert Oppenheimer, who developed the atomic bomb. And both movies came out the same day. And both of them made actually a lot of money this weekend. So movies are in a pretty good spot right now, which is kind of nice.
But now why did those two get smashed together into some sort of phenomena? Because they don't seem to be anything alike. I mean, someone interested in Oppenheimer and weapons and World War II should not be into Barbie.
Right. A big reason why this happened is because, so the Barbie movie is obviously highly anticipated because it's the Barbie movie. It's kind of the first of its kind. Oppenheimer is made by a film director named Christopher Nolan. He made Inception and the Dark Knight movies, and he's a very high-profile filmmaker. And so this is his latest movie. He had been working with Warner Brothers, which is the studio that did the Dark Knight movies, for like 20 years, and then in the last few years he parted ways with them because some of their choices during the pandemic of how to release movies he didn't agree with. So he moved his movie to Universal Pictures, and that's the company that's releasing it. And then Warner Brothers said, "You know what? Fine, we're going to put Barbie in theaters on the same day as your movie as competition." At first, people weren't happy about that, but actually it turns out that a lot of people went to see both movies, and my wife and I saw both movies over the weekend, and I enjoyed both of them very much.
Yeah, my son went to both in one day. I don't know how he did that. He said, "Dad, it was kind of weird because he started with Barbie." Right. He was like, "Dad, I don't know, like it was hard to focus after on a 3-hour Oppenheimer afterwards." Right. But now, before we get to the specifics in terms of your reviews, don't studios generally try to kind of like talk to each other and not release big movies on the same weekend? Isn't that typical?
That seems typical, yeah. But unfortunately, in the last 3+ years with COVID and theaters closing down and streaming services ramping up, and then in the last couple of years, not seeing the results that they wanted to see. There's a lot of production companies and studios and a lot of different organizations that are kind of in flux right now, and some of them are in turmoil. And so you see a lot of movies and a lot of companies making very strange decisions about what kind of movies to make and how to release them and where to put them. And some of them, as we've seen this summer, I mean, the Indiana Jones movie cost a lot of money and did not make nearly as much money to make it back. Same with some of other Disney's movies. I mean, The Little Mermaid didn't make as much money as they hoped. So, you see several of those, and it's the kind of thing that happens every few decades, I think, where you see these trends start to die out of what the movies that they used to go to see in droves, they're not going to see in droves anymore. And so this weekend kind of proved that, well, okay, these movies aren't sequels. They're sort of based around, they're not maybe original material, original stories, because one's based on a true story, one's based on Barbie, but they're their own movies, standalone movies, not sequels. And maybe that's what people are hungry for right now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because we've been in this odd trend where it's remakes and sequels, even if the sequels are 20 years after the first one. So people are getting sick of this now.
Right. I think there are certainly exceptions, like Top Gun Maverick last year was
good.
Huge. That's mainly, I think, because it's actually like a solid movie with good characters and things like that. People, a big part of it is that, it didn't have the greatest opening. It had a pretty solid opening weekend at the box office, but word of mouth was so good that it sustained through most of that year. And so when a movie doesn't have that, people, they know right away on social media, like, oh, okay, well, I can wait for streaming or I can wait for DVD. I'm not necessarily one of those people because I like going to the movie theater, but there are certainly ones that even I skip.
Well, some trends have annoyed me. Like I'm getting sick of Disney remaking their own things with live action. I'm getting sick of the sequels and all that. Are you feeling good about where we're headed cinema wise?
It's a mixed bag because while, there's a variety of different movies out right now with different results, there's also a couple strikes going on in Hollywood because writers and actors, not necessarily like the superstars, but, the working actors who are, supporting characters in certain films and character actors that go from job to job, they, their guilds basically went on strike because they couldn't reach a deal with producers about how to get paid properly with streaming and residuals and things like that. Also, AI is a thing that people are not really sure how to handle with, like, can you write scripts or make actors, supporting actors with AI? And some people are, the producers like that as a cost-cutting measure, but that also cuts out a lot of human jobs. And so that's a point of contention in Hollywood right now. So it's kind of a mess, and I really hope that by the end of the year they get that situated and we see, more clear directions of where movies should be going.
Yeah, I mean, people still like great writing, in my experience, and great filmmaking, and you can't do that without great actors and writers. So I hope they can iron this out soon. All right, let's dig in now to the films. You've seen them. Tell us, first of all, about Lauren's favorite, because she loved Barbie. Barbie. How did that go for you?
I really enjoyed Barbie.
Really?
I thought it was a very funny movie, one of the funniest movies I've seen in a theater in several years. My wife and I saw it, and she can attest that I was kind of giddy most of the time. But also, I think no matter what side of the spectrum you're on, right? Because the trailers for Barbie even said, like, if you love Barbie, you'll love this movie. If you hate Barbie, you'll love this movie, because it does kind of poke fun at the cliches of the Barbie doll through the decades. You see a ton of different characters in Barbie land that represent real Barbies that have existed, that some worked more than others. And I think that's a credit to the film, that it's not just a product placement for Barbie. It's kind of airing out dirty laundry in a sense of saying, like, here's this brand and here's what people like and don't like about it, and we're going to acknowledge all of it, but also make you laugh and also ask questions about, like, what does it mean to be, a man or a woman? What was I made to do? What was I made to be? Questions that certainly are, can point people to the Lord, but the movie's unfortunately not doing that. But it's certainly posing questions that I think people can wonder about.
Now, wasn't Mattel part of the making of this?
Oh, yeah. So the Mattel is a production company, or now as well as a toy brand that kind of, is responsible for the making of the film. And they were kind of hoping that if this movie did well, they could make other movies based on Mattel toys like Hot Wheels and stuff like that. And they probably will in the next few years. But a big part of the film is that Barbie is, starting to have these, malfunctions basically, and she has to travel from Barbie land to the real world, and she finds the Mattel headquarters and has to figure out what's going on and how to save Barbie land and all kinds of things. And meanwhile, Ryan Gosling as Ken is on his own journey of figuring out how to take over Barbie land. It's complicated maybe, but it's I thought it was very funny. Okay,
so what's your advice for Christian audiences? Because I've heard that it's not for kids.
It is not for kids. I was really hoping that they would be able to pull off like a PG-rated Barbie movie. Unfortunately, there are a few too many like adult jokes that make it PG-13. And I think families with like preteens and teenagers will probably be fine. But when we saw it on Saturday night, I'm pretty sure there was like a 2-year-old a few rows ahead of us that we could hear every once in a while. And I'm like, I don't know if this is the best movie experience for that little one. But maybe the jokes are just going over her head. I don't know. So then you're sending out a measure of caution for Christian audiences as well? I would. And I would say the same for Oppenheimer as well. That's why like movie ratings exist. You see a movie's rated PG-13 or R, and it gives reasons for that. There are resources like Focus on the Family and other sites that will break down what are the things in the movie that audiences might find objectionable, and I would encourage you to seek those out if you're interested in knowing more.
And with that, let's turn our attention, as you suggested, to Oppenheimer. Give us the basics in terms of whether you liked it or not.
I thought Oppenheimer was terrific. It's 3 hours. It's a very talky movie, a lot of different characters, a lot of history that goes on with not only his life, but just the development of the atomic bomb. And if you know what the atomic bomb was used for at the end of World War II, it does, go in that direction. And there's a lot that it's very much focused on him and as a person and the guilt that he dealt with as a result of that, as a result of affairs that he had in his life with other women. And the film doesn't shy away from depicting some of those things, and that's a big reason why it's rated R. And so that's a word of caution as well. But I thought as a film about this character and this man, that also shows him dealing with consequences of his actions. I mean, I think there's a lot that Christians can glean from that, and as a cautionary tale.
Yes, and in fact, I think in quote unquote Christian films, sometimes we struggle to depict sin in a realistic way, where people actually have to deal with real consequences. So I'm not saying Christians go see this. You're saying it's R. Be very cautious. Do some research. But you're saying in terms of filmmaking, writing, acting, it was fabulous.
It was, and I will be going again next week with a group of friends. There are a few theaters in the country that are showing it in IMAX film. I saw it in digital projection at an IMAX screen near me, but we're going to Indianapolis next Monday to see it on a huge screen with film projection. And as a film nerd, I get really excited about that. So.
Yeah, it's a major film nerd move to go to Indianapolis to watch a movie. Just in case you're wondering, I wanted to give you that tip. We can't miss the opportunity. We've had a lot of people sending us notes about it. There's a Christian film that surprised everyone, I think, in its success, The Sound of Freedom. What is it, and what do you think of it?
Sound of Freedom is a movie that Angel Studios, who made The Chosen, they basically purchased so that they could put it in theaters from another company. It's about Jim Ballard, who used to work for the U.S. government and eventually moved into saving children that were trapped in trafficking. And it's based on a true story. There are portions of the film that are kind of fictionalized and exaggerated, and there's been some controversy about that. But it's also as we talk about, how do we depict sin in film? It's a good example, I think, of you tackle a huge, terrible issue like child trafficking in a way that it certainly doesn't glorify it, but it also doesn't create, a stumbling block because it depicts certain, scenes and things like that. But it's made over $100 million at just the U.S. box office, and I never thought that would happen. But people are going to see it, and it's great.
Boy, okay, so what do you make of its tremendous success? Is this Christian audiences supporting a great film, or is it Christian audiences supporting Christian movies?
I think you get more of the latter most of the time, unfortunately. And I think Sound of Freedom is a decent film. There's maybe some issues with how deep does it really go into his character, and what is really exaggerated, and should that have been the case? But in terms of production, I think it's pretty solid. But I think a big reason why audiences are really coming out in droves is to say this supports our worldview, this supports what we believe, and I think it's important that we go to see films that represents that, and because it tells people that, we will go see this, and these are messages that we want to see portrayed in film. And I think it's also important that filmmakers, including future filmmakers like our students at Cedarville, think about, what are the stories I can tell? What are the messages I can have in my stories, not in a preachy way, but in a way that still points people to the Lord and to God's word, while also being a movie and telling a story and developing characters. It's a very hard balance, but it's important.
Yeah, and this is the challenge I have is I grew up as a musician. I can still consider myself one, not very good one, but still I care about art. And so there's no award for best message in filmmaking. So how do we merge a great message with really great writing and cinematography and acting? Yeah.
I think the best movies, they have a message that is demonstrated not just through characters talking about those things, but demonstrating it through their actions and seeing consequences of their actions, whether that's good or bad. And I also think there's a huge discipleship aspect to being a filmmaker as well. Of like, it's not just making the film, but how you interact with other people as you're making the film, as well as talking to people after you've made the film. That's a huge part of your witness. And I think sometimes we Christian filmmakers tend to forget that. It's like we put it all in the film and just kind of wipe our hands and move on to something else. But like Philip with the Ethiopian, and what we read about in Acts, there's, we've got to come alongside people and point them the right direction.
Yeah, great stuff. Again, we're so grateful for our time with Sean O'Connor, who again is Assistant Professor of Broadcasting, Digital Media, and Journalism at Cedarville University. If perhaps you're a person who wants to study film and make one of those movies that's not just a great message, but also great writing, cinematography, and acting, Cedarville could be the place for you. Go to cedarville.edu to learn more. Again, cedarville.edu. Sean O'Connor, thanks again for your time today and for going to see all the movies for us.
Thanks,